West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
White nationalism is increasingly coursing through the veins of the American right. Over the weekend, roughly 150 white supremacists marched in Philadelphia, clashing with pedestrians and setting off smoke bombs. Police said they were chanting slogans like "Reclaim America" and "The election was stolen." You catch that? These modern-day Klansmen were chanting that the election was stolen from the disgraced former president. There's a reason for all this, of course, the Orange Man and his administration. Stephen Miller, who's currently helping sue black farmers on behalf of white farmers, brought them out of the shadows by parroting their talking points that they hear on Fox News from Tucker Carlson, which in turn is magnified via social media by a constellation of QAnon devotees. According to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, QAnon is using racist propaganda in an apparent attempt to appeal to a wider audience, particularly suburban women. For more, I'm joined by Mia Bloom, who wrote that article. She's a professor at Georgia State University and co-author of Pastels and Pedophiles, Inside the Mind of QAnon. I'm also joined by Malcolm Nance, MSNBC counterterrorism and intelligence analyst. Thank you both for being here. And Mia, I want to start with you because, you know, QAnon, when I first heard about it, because a friend of mine has a family member that's caught up in it, who's somebody who seemed to be a normal sort of professional who sort of burst into this weird ideology. I think I didn't really understand how much of it was based on not just anti-Semitic tropes, but racial tropes. Talk a little bit about that.
I fully expected that QAnon was going to be anti-Semitic because it has elements, you know, a global cabal and talking about George Soros or Janet Yellen. And it also talks about blood drinking, which these are all things that have been, Jews have been accused of for hundreds of years in Europe and through the church. But when we started looking last summer at the Save the Children campaign, and I'm a supporter of Save the Children, the charity.
The real one.
And so I thought, wait a second, all these children are white and all the Save the Children are not. And so we did a systematic study because I needed data to show that they were using these racist tropes that go to, let's say, the period of Restoration, where there were stereotypes of the black brute who was going to rape the white woman or kidnap the white woman. And so this is like heart and soul of QAnon.
It's and just to be clear, for those of you who are unaware, because you're living your lives and trying not to pay attention to this, QAnon is basically the belief that the world is run by a cabal of pedophiles who kill children and drink their blood. I guess to stay young forever, maybe they're also vampires. I'm really not sure. But that the person who's going to unmask this devilish conspiracy is Donald Trump, who can barely read a cue card and couldn't run casinos in Atlantic City. But somehow he's going to break this massive cabal. So that's the theory. You know, in the previous block, Malcolm, I talked about the fact that if this was happening in any other era, we'd be talking about fascism. And people get uncomfortable using the F word here about the sort of global reach of all this. But we just saw these neo-Nazis marching in Philadelphia. And the group, other than Black Lives Matter, which has the word black in it, which freaks people out, I guess, the big opponent of the right is Antifa, which is basically short for anti-fascists. So the people that they despise the most and think are the most dangerous are Black Lives Matter, a plea for black people not to be murdered by police, and anti-fascists. So am I unfair to say that we're talking about essentially American fascism?
No, not at all. Anyone that can, see with their eyes understands what's going on here. We are in a neo-fascist era in American politics. Back in 1939, 1940, there was a formal fascist movement which openly supported Adolf Hitler and called for American, independence and, isolation away from Europe's war, which Hitler had just invaded, called the America First movement. It was championed by people like John, Lindbergh, the famous flyer. They had a rally in Madison Square Garden in which George Washington was juxtaposed with Adolf Hitler. These people were fascists. But what we've seen is after World War II, when they were essentially run to the ground, there was a rise in the 1950s and 60s of these very small fascist groups that turned into terrorist groups like the Christian Identity Movement. What we are seeing now is a merger of every white nationalist trope and group and ideology bound together by the crazy QAnon conspiracy theory into a American neo-fascist movement led by a fascist president of the United States. Look, if I were doing an intelligence assessment of, Hungary, I would be coming up with these exact same lines of investigation, which would be bringing us to these conclusions that there is a fascist movement, not just in the United States, all over Europe, which is actually funded, surprisingly, by Russia. In France, Italy, Spain, neo-fascist movements everywhere are out to take down American democracy.
And it's the sort of irony is if you read up on it, I mean, Hitler was inspired both by Mussolini's original fascism, which is where it started, not in Germany, but also by the United States, in which Americans invented the idea of coding anyone with African lineage as Negro and as thus both enslavable and as segregatable based on even one drop of black blood. Look it up. It's actually true. Mia, the other piece, absolutely. Mia, the other piece that you get to, and I think this is important and scary, I think, in a really fundamental way because of how religious the United States is as a country. How much of this QAnon movement is pushing its way into the evangelical movement and targeting evangelicals to try to recruit them?
Well, that's the scariest part because it's making inroads into every religion. Despite the fact that it's anti-Semitic, it's drawing Orthodox Jews, it's anti-Catholic, it's drawing Latinx Catholics, but the largest group are the evangelicals, that around 35% of evangelicals believe that there's a blood drinking cabal. But remember, evangelicals are also a proselytizing religion, and they'll go out to Papua New Guinea or Ghana or wherever they're going, and they're going to bring this ideology with them. And so we are seeing a metastasis of QAnon to 85 different countries. And the reason I wrote the piece about racism is as they are spreading their tentacles to get into South and Latin America or into Africa or among African American voters in this country, I want people to know how racist QAnon really is.
And Malcolm, the thing is, the other piece is that for this kind of a movement to take hold of a political party where the leadership seems just completely impotent to do anything about it. Kevin and those guys, Mitch doesn't want to do anything about it because he's just like, am I going to get power out of this? If I'm going to get power, whatever. But if you want to be fascist, I don't care. But Kevin seems helpless. Meanwhile, there's a poll that the Global Morning Consult did where it found that 26% of Americans qualified as highly right-wing authoritarian. That's twice the share of the number two countries, Canada and Australia. 4 in 10 Republicans versus in an American Enterprise Institute, that's a conservative organization, they did a poll that said political violence may be necessary. If elected leaders will not protect America, the public must do it themselves, even if it requires violent actions. Add to that, I want to know how concerned you are, given that data, Malcolm. The guy who runs MyPillow, who's a ridiculous figure, but you can be ridiculous and dangerous. He has said that on August 13th, Donald Trump will return to office. He will be reimposed in office, which is a QAnon belief system. He also claimed there will be many down-ticket senators who will have different election results. They're talking about stealing elections and Trump being returned. How worried should we be about a January 6th style event somewhere in the United States when he is not reinstated, Trump?
I don't think we should really worry about the August date because, as we know, these things are come and go. They've had these dates before. It's the post-August period that I would really be watching as a terrorism professional because, Donnie O'Sullivan, I'll give a shout out to our brothers at CNN, did some interviews with these people, and they said that if Trump is not reinstalled, then they're going to have to start talking civil war. I've been monitoring their communications since last December. These people are already, many of them, committed to the concept of overthrowing American democracy and inciting civil war. All you have to do is watch AR-15 ammunition prices, which skyrocketed last year from 21 cents a bullet to almost $1.25 a bullet now. Many of these people think that there is an apocalypse coming. Let me tie this back into QAnon. I think you were rather modest in what you said QAnon was. They believe that there is a global cabal of people who are eating, kidnapping, and sex trafficking children who are the entire Democratic Party, all liberals, all progressives, and the fundamental way of dealing with them is a mass genocide of all liberals and Democrats, or bringing them to Guantanamo, or having what they call the Day of the Rope, which actually came from the Turner Diaries, the book Timothy McVeigh read at the time. These people are the farthest edge of the farthest extreme, and they are now the core identity of the Republican Party. The Republicans tried to co-opt them in 2018. QAnon co-opted the Republican Party. They just removed the letter Q. They don't allow Q t-shirts. But the belief system of the Republicans now, full on QAnon.
It is Tuesday, the 6th of July of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Indeed, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world, because that's what spice does. Okay, well, I'm just looking for a little bit of corroboration. I think Malcolm Nance and Joy and crew there, on the panel, put it quite succinctly. Yes, we are indeed in a neo-fascist era in American politics. Indeed we are. But that's another one of those I told you so's. I was speaking with my best friend last night for actually a considerable time on the telephone. Because we hadn't spoken with each other for a considerable time on the telephone. But anyway, we were bemoaning this feeling that we're getting in our old age about I told you so's. And climate change is something that, we were pretty much arguing about in junior high. Right there around the, it's the late 60s. After 65, 66. I guess when junior high officially started for us. We've been arguing against that since then. Certainly since 68, when the Santa Barbara oil spill, they called it. It was a spill. And another one of those blowouts. But we found out about that later. But that so offended a lot of folks down in that area. Our family was one of, shall I say, countless, whatever that means. Don't say countless. Anyway, we were one of many, 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 many families that went to the Santa Barbara area and helped clean up because it was so offensive what happened. Oh, you don't know what happened? Oh, sure you do. My audience does. Because we are all of a certain age now, aren't we? Well, maybe. But for those of you who may not be, there was an oil spill. It wasn't a spill. It was a blowout. Anyway, it fouled the beaches and it killed waterfowl, among other fowls and life forms. And it was horrendous. So, yeah, then Earth Day came up, and we've been arguing about, look, if we don't change our ways, we're going to burn ourselves up or flood ourselves out or be able to stop breathing or UV rays are going to kill us because of ozone holes. And, all the stuff that we said was going to happen happened because we listened to science, even though we might be youngsters at the time. And everything that we tried to convince people is happening. They laughed at us. Oh, you're just an extremist. You're just a tree hugger. You love the earth. Man, yeah, well, it's the only place we got. But we're dealing with a group of people who have used religion to justify absolutely everything, even their own demise. It was planned by God. No, it wasn't. If we even go by the construct that they set down in whatever manifesto that they call a Bible, we all have a certain level of volition here, don't we? We get to choose. Some people choose badly. Other people choose wisely. And I think everybody, doesn't really matter now, does it? Because nihilism or nihilism rules the roost. Whatever. Talk about nihilism or nihilism. Oh, yes. Now, I might as well be a little jocular. It's a little bit like gallows humor, but hey. You got to survive somehow now, don't you? Yes, we do. Well, it looks like all sorts of things have been happening in the world. No one likes Meghan McCain on The View. They're glad that she's gone. Well, that wasn't really a show I sat around and watched because, I do that for an hour already, sometimes with myself. Not during this show. I'm talking about just, sitting around wherever. No, it's not necessarily a show I watch because I don't have time, and this probably comes on at a time when I'm not, I can just take off. No, I got too much to do. I got a garden I'm trying to save in this heat dome. Oh my God. So, looks like, Mo Brooks looks like he might be ready to flip on Trump. At least that's a little headline I saw coming across the transom. Well, that's the headline I conjectured would be. It looks like, according to various pundits out there, that Brooks is throwing Trump under the bus. Because it looks like when Mo Brooks wasn't able to avoid that lawsuit that Swalwell was serving on him, and they finally were able to give the papers to his wife. So that means that, he's been duly served. He's finding out, wow, this is serious. You're damn right. What is it about these Republicans? They could just break the law, and it's like, laws are for little people. Those laws are for little people. I'm a big person. It doesn't apply to me. Yeah. So they've been living under this delusion. And I think that they're going to have a rude awakening because, most of us have just accepted that the law is the law. And if we need to change the law, there's a way to do that in a legislative process that doesn't hurt people. That side thinks that voting hurts people. Why? Because it might hurt them. We're dealing with a party that has not elected in a national election a president by popular vote for how many decades now? They've been able to get their people in on technicalities and a little bit of help with a society that writes contracts in Cyrillic, if you know what I mean. They see the proverbial writing on the wall, and it's not necessarily in Cyrillic. It's full-blown American English with a couple of FUs, and they hate being found out. But, they're going to have a rude awakening because the law applies equally and with due process. So Trump thinks that he ran out the clock, but the crimes have been committed. And I know it might just be on taxes, but apparently it's so important to them to avoid paying taxes that they murder, pillage, and will destroy democracy just so they don't have to pay taxes. We don't want to share. Well, it's not sharing, Now we're going to have to civil asset forfeiture your property. Yeah, I'd like to see that. Because maybe we might get Medicare for all and free education for our kids, like how it was back in the day. Well, we'd have Medicare for all, but you know what I mean. Yeah, there was a time, I remember times when doctors would actually come to the house. No one makes house calls anymore. My gosh. So it looks like the reverberations of this crass cult called Trump continues because people are being really, how shall I put it, racist bigots out in the open. What's fun about it this time is that it's like a candid camera everywhere, except without the pithy commentary. It's just raw footage. Well, it's good to expose it, but we cannot laugh it away. People were laughing at Hitler. They laughed at the stormtrooper brown shirt Nazi Jungen until those brown shirt stormtrooper Nazi Jungen burned down their houses with them inside. Yeah, then they knew. Don't laugh at it anymore. We have to stand up to it. And how do we stand up to it? Well, I don't know. Voting? They're pretty much trying to neuter the vote now, aren't they? Let's hope they don't have any more voting decisions going to the Supreme Court. Jeez. How many more enabling acts can they issue? I thought, they just keep coming. I made a joke a couple of years ago about them passing the enabling acts and the Supreme Court saying, yeah, that's just fine. Well, they keep coming up with them. And how many more? I thought this was a representative democracy. Everybody wants our side, not their side. But here we are. Well, what do we have curated for you on this fine Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays here as we start off in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? This is the salon part. The chef's table is upcoming, as you know. At the top, of course, Malcolm Nance, Joy Reid, and I am so sorry, but there was a woman on the panel, and she made exceedingly pertinent points about the religious aspect. Blood libel. Yeah, where they're drinking the blood of babies. How many pogroms have I heard that before? Jesus Christ. Oh, literally, too. On bended knee. Help us, save us, stop them. Well, they agree that we have entered into a neo-fascist era in American politics. And I'll just say it again. I told you so. That's almost redundant. On the rest of the menu, census takers worry that apartment renters were undercounted. Yeah. And I wonder if that was by design. I think so. Not by the census takers, of course. But you know what we mean. After stripping federal protections in the waning days of his administration, Trump unleashed an outright slaughter of wolves in Wisconsin. And far-right extremist militias like the 3%ers have infiltrated local governments. And the locals are not happy. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the Honduran mastermind behind the 2016 killing of prize-winning environmental and indigenous rights defender Berta Cáceres has finally been convicted. and renowned winemaker Moet-Hennessy is suspending champagne shipments to Russia after a law was adopted that allows the term to be used only for Russian champagne. That only means one thing. Vlad is going to annex the Champagne region of France. Well, no more bubbly for you. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and thank you, Kelly, for doing so. To the left of that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it would be so helpful. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds our way, it will help us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this resistance against the neo-Nazi, neo-fascist. It's just a Nazi takeover of America, and we will not allow it, at least not with a fight. And how do we fight? Well, we're doing it. Lend a voice. Oh, which reminds me, if you have any kind of news that you would like to share on Netroots Radio, and you have the technical abilities to do so, send a clip our way. And yeah, we're looking for content. So there's people who are getting tired, and but we're going to continue to march on, because that's what we do. And thank you for your generosity out there in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, oh so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's so simple. Do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then hopefully that gets posted up on social media platforms like Twitter before the show begins, but sometimes I'm scrambling, so you know how it is. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and most importantly, because time is fungible, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. That's right. Okay, so, if you have suggestions, I'm always looking for content too, to fill up the clock, as they say. And it would be nice to have some, contemporary voices here. And this is a platform that you could utilize if you choose to do so. You know how Volition is. Alrighty, let's tuck in. Yes, we'll use that obscure culinary term here in the salon part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. I should mention also, for those of you who don't know or have forgotten, we put roasted corn in the chowders, especially on Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Roasted corn. Maybe I should put up a little my recipe for roasted corn, because it's all in the prep, as you know. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes from the Associated Press by Mike Schneider. Census taker Linda Rothfield's government-issued iPhone kept directing her back to apartments in San Francisco that she already knew were vacant. When she did find apartments that were occupied, she was sometimes turned away because of the pandemic. I had a few landlords who said, "It's COVID, you can't come in," Rothfield said. In a national headcount turned upside down by natural disasters, political turmoil, Trump, and a deadly virus, apartment renters proved particularly hard to count last year. That has former census takers and experts worried that the tally failed to account for all of them, overlooking people in the nation's 44 million rental homes carries a potentially high price because the census helps determine how $1.5 trillion in federal money is spent. And the lower numbers would mean less government help to pay for schools, roads, and medical services in those communities, and I think that's a feature, not a bug. Around 36% of homes in the U.S. are occupied by renters, up from 33% during the last census a decade ago. Under the best of circumstances, renters are among the hardest people to count because they tend to be more transient and are more likely to live below the poverty line. They also tend to be disproportionately people of color, who also are traditionally undercounted in the census. Traditionally? You mean like systemically? Incomplete data on the race or ethnic background of renters could also hinder the foundation of black or Hispanic majority political districts. Well, of course. Of course, that's why Trump wanted to keep the count from being counted. Renters typically have lower self-response rates than homeowners, so the government relies more on census takers knocking on their doors, said Jerry Green, a former senior advisor at the Census Bureau, who served as a consultant to the National Urban League during the 2020 census. This is a population that was at risk of being missed prior to COVID, Green said. We know it's a challenge for the Census Bureau to accurately enumerate renters. During the 2010 census, renters were undercounted by 1.1%, but the rate was higher for some tenants. Black male renters between the ages of 30 and 49 were undercounted by 12.2%. And Hispanic male renters between 18 and 29 were undercounted by 8.6%, and that's according to the Leadership Conference Education Fund. In cases where renters did not respond to census questionnaires or census takers were unable to interview them, the Census Bureau had to use other less reliable methods to count. Those methods include using administrative records from the IRS or the Social Security Administration, asking neighbors or postal workers for information, or using a last resort statistical technique that was pretty much pulled out of people's asses. In this professional opinion, some 60% of census supervisors surveyed the Governmental Accountability Office for a study on 2020 census operations and reported that their census takers had difficulties completing caseloads because they were unable to get into apartment buildings. The pandemic made communication with building managers difficult, the GAO said in a report issued in March. Specifically, census supervisors told us that enumerators were often turned away from accessing multi-unit buildings because of the pandemic. How much renters were undercounted, if they actually were missed, will not be known until December and early next year with the release of a survey that measures the accuracy of the count. Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays is by Common Dreams by way of Raw Story. A new study published yesterday, Monday, estimates that Wisconsin lost as much as a third of its gray wolf population after the Trump administration stripped federal protections from the animals and the state allowed for a public wolf hunt, widely decried as being, quote, divorced from science and ethical norms, end quote. And as reported here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy when it happened. The February hunt, panned by wildlife advocates as an outright slaughter, killed 218 wolves, already far past the quota the state had set. But over 100 additional wolf deaths were the result of what's known as cryptic poaching. What's cryptic poaching? Well, that refers to illegal killings in which hunters hide evidence of their activities. The majority of those surplus deaths, the researchers estimate, occurred after the Trump administration announced on November 3rd of 2020 the lifting of endangered species protections for gray wolves in the lower 48 states. That shift became effective in January of 2021. According to the study published in the journal Purge, between 98 and 105 wolves died since November 2020 that would have been alive had delisting not occurred. An optimistic scenario puts the state wolf numbers for April of 2021 at between 695 and 751 wolves. That's down from at least 1,034 from last year, representing a decrease of almost a third. Actually, over a third in 1 year. That decline, the researchers said, is at clear odds with Wisconsin's stated goal of the hunt to allow for sustainable harvest that neither increases nor decreases the state's wolf population. Although the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is aiming for a stable population, we estimate the population actually dropped significantly, said co-author Adrian Trevis, a professor at the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and director of the Carnivore Coexistence Lab at UW-Madison, said in a statement. Of The Daily Beast brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. On Saturday, about 100 people gathered in a park in this normally sleepy town of about 1,200, some wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts, others with peace symbols. Speakers took turns inveighing on fighting racism and standing up for LGBTQ rights, regular causes in the left-wing activist space. But their target was not racist cops, conservative Republicans, or some other traditional bête noire. Instead, their anger was squarely trained at the paramilitary organization some locals say has gained a disturbing foothold. The racism and division of the right-wing militias really has no place in our community, Mayor Scott Chaplin told the crowd. Tension has been steadily rising here on Whidbey Island, a collection of picturesque rural towns north of Seattle, after a militia group started holding rallies and taking aim at community groups and local government. The precedent of far-right activists is on the rise everywhere, from Portland to the steps of the U.S. Capitol, and has local officials and residents alike bracing for the worst. In the meantime, residents described extremists quietly tearing the very fabric of their community apart. I should remind folks that one of the bigger stories is Eamon Bundy attempting to take over Idaho completely, and he's using the housing shortage as a reason to confiscate federal land and open it up to developers, in which he is considered to be in his own fervid mind. I am concerned because I think the Trump presidency emboldened a very small fringe group of people, but they've been growing a movement and attracting more and more people, Mayor Chaplin said in an interview with the Daily Beast, and they truly believe what they're doing is right. Well, of course Nazis do. South Whidbey Island is a rolling wooded landscape with pine forests, punctuated by idyllic farms and spectacular views of the Puget Sound. It's a small, tight-knit community, the kind of place many come for a peaceful retirement on the water, and where tourists flock by ferry on weekends to shop in quaint seaside villages like Langley. So last fall, when members and supporters of the Washington 3% militia took control of the nearly 100-year-old local Grange Association and began rejecting applications for those not aligned with them, it caught a lot of locals off guard. The Grange and its turn-of-the-century lakeside building serves as a gathering place for the community. Think quilting classes and slideshows of neighbors' trips abroad. Since then, the militia's public presence on the island has been sporadic, but 3%er flags and bumper stickers have increasingly popped up around the town and at left-wing rallies. And at least some agents of local law enforcement have indicated that they do not see the group as a top priority, with Sheriff Rick Ferici telling the Seattle Times, "People have a right to join organizations and express their opinions." Well, you know the 3%ers are cops. Former and current, you know. The stealthy takeover is straight out of the modern far-right playbook. Target local and state elections, boards, and other institutions that often fly under the radar to increase influence. Far-right groups are running candidates in rural state house seats, school boards, and even library boards across the country, often rallying around panics of the moment like so-called critical race theory. The Grange takeover calcified a political divide that had been slowly coming out into the open on Whidbey Island. The Washington 3% held an anti-lockdown rally on the island in October in defiance of the state's mask mandate, attracting GOP congressional candidates and reportedly using the Grange as a launching pad. The group's founder and president, Matt Marshall, rejects the extremism label and bristles at being lumped in with racist groups. And it should be noted, critics could not point to specific acts of racism by the group. He also says they're not a militia, though they do have weapons training and talk about being ready to fight back if faced with what they deem a tyrannical government. Some individuals with ties to 3%ers, a larger paramilitary umbrella named for the false premise that only 3% of U.S. colonists fought the American Revolution, have also been tied to the attack on the U.S. Capitol. In a text message during an interview, Marshall called local activists' criticism of his organization a smear campaign. Would-be Washington 3% official Eric Rode also declined an interview request. Would-be Island Grange Master Chuck Prochaska did not return a request for comment in this story. In keeping with locals' fears for their future, Marshall, a combat veteran and physician's assistant, has taken steps to make his group more mainstream, like registering as a nonprofit, positioning them as a community organization. And he also won election to the school board in Eatonville, a rural town south of Seattle. Of course, schools are especially central to the local conflict here. The battle over the direction of South Whidbey Island started to come to a head on June 11 when more than 100 demonstrators came out to protest a student-led effort to get South Whidbey High School to teach more LGBTQ inclusive curriculum and to recognize the Black Lives Matter movement. The protesters were met by a student-led counter-protest of more than 300 people. Shortly after, a Black Lives Matter sign was stolen from the school, and the Class of 2021 sign was vandalized with a hammer and sickle and graffiti that said, "Fuck commies." How nice. The protest has Murphy and others worried about public education in their community, and some locals expressing fear that candidates in the next school board election might prove sympathetic to the far right. Chaplin, the Langley mayor, thinks things will get worse on the island before they get better. Still, he's optimistic the rise of the far-right forces in his community is a temporary phenomenon. I think, ironically, what they're doing is going to backfire on them because it's actually bringing the rest of the community together in ways we haven't really been together in a long while. Well, when you awaken the slumbering giant, you'll find out, won't you? Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Can a high school punish a student for criticizing the school on Snapchat? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. At a high school in Pennsylvania, a 9th grader, identified in the recent Supreme Court decision as BL, didn't make the varsity cheerleading squad, and in the words of the court, did not accept that decision with good grace. More specifically, BL posted to her Snapchat friends group an image of herself and a friend giving a middle finger salute with the caption, "F*** school, f*** softball, f*** cheer, f*** everything." The image was brought to the attention of the school authorities, who punished her, suspending her from the JV cheerleading squad for a year. The student apologized, but to no avail. The punishment stood until the students sued in federal district court and won at the Court of Appeals, and at the end of June won her freedom of speech case at the Supreme Court as well. The High Court ruled that the school's interest in teaching good manners did not overcome the students' interest in free expression, emphasizing that the speech caused minimal disruption to teaching, learning, and school activities, and that the school has an important interest in protecting a student's unpopular expression, especially when the expression takes place off campus. The 8-1 majority opinion, written by Justice Breyer, intentionally does not answer all the questions of when off-campus speech might not be protected, but made clear that in this instance, it clearly was a good and clear victory for freedom of speech. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1988. That was the day 167 oil workers were killed in the Piper Alpha oil rig explosion in the North Sea. It is considered the world's deadliest oil rig accident ever. Around 10 p.m., the platform essentially turned into a fireball so massive, rescue helicopters could not get near it. Gas lines ruptured when the night crew accidentally activated a gas pump down for repairs. Immediately, the platform was rocked with explosions, first wiping out the control room, then engulfing it in flames. The platform split into two. Its oil derrick toppled. Most were killed instantly, as the crew's quarters were directly above the gas compression module. Toxic fumes overcame others. Some jumped 100 feet into the sea. The platform was completely destroyed. It took 3 weeks to bring the fire under control. Occidental Petroleum later admitted the rig's design was fundamentally flawed, but many considered the explosion nothing short of industrial murder. The rig was notorious for fatalities and near misses. Jack Malloy, head of the offshore trade union OILC, recalled, Piper was synonymous with accidents. People would say, Piper? Oh, you don't want to go there. That place is ready to go. Conditions were so bad, the union pulled its reps off the safety committee. The next day, 115 oil workers in Humberside walked off the job, demanding better health and safety conditions. Subsequent investigations determined Occidental failed to enforce basic maintenance and safety procedures. Over 100 safety improvements were recommended. Occidental paid out $100 million to the families, but escaped prosecution. Today, there is a memorial chapel at the Kirk of St. Nicholas and a memorial sculpture in the Rose Garden of Hazelhead Park, both in Aberdeen, Scotland.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where we are continuing to be under an active heat advisory, and we are currently at 62 degrees Fahrenheit, with an expected high of nearly the same as yesterday, which was over 100. It looks like sunny skies throughout the day, with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies tonight with lows in the upper 50s, low 60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And then sunny skies tomorrow with an expected drop of temperature down to 92. We can only hope. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus have not been updated quite yet from Friday, so the confirmed cases in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon stands at 11,664, and the deceased stands at 148 confirmed. Updates will be updated later today, and we'll give you those tomorrow. Grass pollen here outside the mothership in Rogue River proper is at high. Ouch, and I can feel it in my nose. The air quality index for the region, though, is good at 37 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Barometric pressure is holding steady. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.97 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is dropping, is now at 40%. Ouch. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 65 and raining. Paris is 72 and sunny. Rome is 91 and sunny with a heat advisory of their own. Kyiv is 82 and fair. Kabul is 86 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 81 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 75 with a rain shower. Sydney, Australia is 51 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 54 and cloudy. And New York is a blistering 85 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Marlon Gonzalez of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Honduran man was convicted of homicide in the 2016 killing of Berta Cáceres, a prize-winning environmental and indigenous rights defender. After a 3-month trial, the court unanimously found Roberto David Castillo Mejia guilty of participating in the killing of Cáceres, a member of the Lenca indigenous group who led opposition to a dam project in which Castillo Mejia was involved. The court will convene on August 2nd to determine a sentence which could be between 24 and 30 years. Castillo Mejia, who prosecutors say masterminded the killing, will remain jailed at an army base until sentencing.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. For most aficionados, a sparkling wine can be called champagne only if it comes from the region of France with that name and is made under certain regulations. A new Russian law makes the counterclaim that the word can be used only for Russian wine. The law has sparked controversy, and the renowned winemaker Moet-Hennessy said yesterday, it was suspending champagne shipments to Russia. And the law that was adopted on Friday allows the term to be used only for Russian champagne. Since Soviet times, champagne, or Champaskoye in Russian, has been used as a generic term for a wide range of sparkling wines, some of which contradict champagne's luxury image by selling for as little as $2 a bottle. These provisions led to a temporary suspension of deliveries of products to assess the impact of this new law, a spokeswoman for Moet-Hennessy said. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.